Now, let us commence the second session of our conference, titled Exploring New Frontiers, Uncovering Economic Potential for Hong Kong's Transformation. Please give a warm round of applause as we welcome the speakers on the stage.
Our moderator for this session is Professor Heiwai Tang, Associate Dean of HKU Business School, Victor and William Fung Professor in Economics and Director of Asia Global Institute. The panel comprises Mr. Daniel Fung, Vice Chairman of Financial Services Development Council, Ms. Wendy Gan Kim-see, Deputy Chief Executive Officer, District Development of West Kowloon Culture District Authority, and Chief Executive Officer of WestK Enterprise Limited. Ms. Alpha Lau, Director General of Investment Promotion of Invest Hong Kong, and the Honorable Sunny Tan, Chairman, Hong Kong Productivity Council and Legislative Council member. Let's have a group photo first. Thank you. Please take your seat on stage.
All right, good morning, everyone. It's another Hong Kong Economic Future Conference. We have been doing this for 4 years in a row, and every year we have some new questions to answer. The Hong Kong economy has been changing quite rapidly in the last few years, but we are still facing quite a lot of challenges, obviously, externally, geopolitical challenges, internally, demographic changes, and how we are going to reposition ourselves, given that the integration with the Greater Bay Area may not be as effective for us as we hope. Every weekend, we know we have a lot of Hong Kong citizens, moving to the northern side of the border, trying to shop and consume, and now even medical services in Hong Kong are being affected because people find that the services in Shenzhen and the rest of Greater Bay Area are cheaper and better. And on the other hand, the financial market has not been doing great. And in the green paper, which is a thick book in front of you on the table, we actually have a few chapters about how we can revive the financial market and also try to fix, which is the attention of Hong Kong people these days, the budget deficit. So I'm not going to go into great details because we have a panel of very distinguished experts, elites, leaders in different sectors. And Zhiwu was saying that Hong Kong should only focus on finance, which I disagree. Zhiwu said economists should not provide advice to the government, which I strongly disagree. Because I think we are not giving advices based on ideology or based on our own agenda. We are giving advices based on research. And as Dean Chai has mentioned, Hong Kong not only has a budget deficit, we also have an idea deficit, right? Something that I may agree with Jiwoo, we are still good friends and colleagues, is that I think the government has been trying to do too many things without really thinking about the priority and what is more important to relaunch Hong Kong as a vibrant international hub again. Anyhow, this is a long introduction, and I should turn it to our distinguished panelists. Instead of doing the formality, which is to introduce each speaker one by one, I'm just going to introduce them just before I ask a question to each of them. So sitting to my right or left is Daniel Fung, who is a lawyer, and also the Vice Chair of Financial Service Development Council. Has been, mover and shaker in Hong Kong, I may say, in the legal profession as well as, in sort of the legal services in the city. He's also traveling around the world a lot. Last year he went to Middle East a few times, representing the Financial Development Council, trying to promote Hong Kong as a new financial hub for the rest of the world, perhaps beyond the US, as Dean Chai and Professor Chen just mentioned. So let me just get to the first question to you, Daniel. I'm just going to call them by first name because I don't have much time, only 46 minutes left, because Dean Chai used more than 2 hours just now, and I'm always a residual claimant before lunch, which I need to provide some real food rather than just food for thought. Daniel, I know you can speak about almost everything, but let's be a bit more focused on the first question, just to get the panel started. So we know people said, well, the stock market is doing great. It's not doing great. This year we are doing much better in terms of IPO. Last year, our IPO market is even worse than India, and people start laughing at us as the ruins of financial center. No one would talk about India as a financial center, but we claim ourselves as a financial center. How could we do worse than India? So based on your observation and research, what do you think is missing, right? What kind of challenges are we facing in the financial sector, and what would be the potential solutions?
Thanks very much, Professor Tang, and thank you for inviting me here. I think we are going through a metamorphosis. What does that mean? That means that we are going through a change, transformation, and rebirth, just like a chrysalis emerging into a butterfly. The process is painful. I think the more important sex in this room, the ladies among us, know how painful birth is, but also how rewarding it is. We are going through exactly the same process, having lost substantially our major export markets as an entrepot center, that is to say, United States and the European Union. We have to reinvent ourselves. And so therefore, in the FSDC, we've been looking at this problem for 4 years now. And the FSDC, you may know, is a think tank. We have only one client. The client is the Hong Kong government, and is fully funded by the taxpayer. However, it includes participation from the private sector. All the usual suspects are there, Goldman, HSBC, UBS, etc. They are all there, participating at different levels, all pro bono. And the acceptance rate of policy proposals that we make is between 70 to 80%. That's the highest, I think, of any think tank in the entire world. And if I give you a comparison, when I was, in a last century working for Chris Patten and later Sich Tung, involved, amongst other things, in looking at law reform, the acceptance rate was single digit, same as acceptance rate in the UK. So there is impact. Now, what have we identified and proposed? In the reinvention or the reimagination of Hong Kong's future through a financial and economic lens, we need to look at two things. One are the new economies. What do I mean by that? We look at transition finance. We are moving rapidly towards a green and sustainable future, and China leads. We know that in many ways, the United States has abstained from this process for all sorts of domestic political reasons, as well as geopolitics too. So let me give you an example. When I led a delegation to COP29, which was in Baku, Azerbaijan, in November this year, the biggest player was China. The United States was almost absent. Contrast that with COP28 in Dubai, which was 2023 November. I also went and led a delegation there. In the blue zone, which is the official zone, the biggest player was the United States with their own pavilion. China was almost insignificant. Today, the tables are reversed in just 12 months. Now, why has that happened? Simply because of a number of factors. Number one, China, we know, is the last remaining manufacturing superpower. And it leads in the green revolution, so in terms of green energy, batteries, power generation, EVs. there is simply no competition. And why is that? Because in many different ways, the United States has opted to go along a different path, simply because the United States sees itself as traditional energy sufficient. So with shale being extracted in the Bakken, in Texas, in the Dakotas, and also with tar sands in Alberta, United States competes with Saudi Arabia. China is natural energy insufficient, fossil fuel insufficient since 1993. Before 93, China exported oil from Daqing and also from Xinjiang to the rest of the world. By 93, after Deng Xiaoping's Nansun, the rapid industrialization of China meant that domestic production no longer sufficed to meet domestic energy demands, and therefore we had to import. Where did we import from in those days? We did not have a look-in to Saudi Arabia because the United States almost monopolized that market in terms of buying oil and letting Saudi Arabia accumulate petrodollars. By 93, we had to import from Angola, and we were criticized for dealing with, as it were, shady rogue regimes. So we had no option. Today, we are the biggest buyer of Saudi gas. So the tables, again, have turned. Now, everybody knows that the age of fossil fuel is drawing to a close. This is a sunset industry. They're dinosaurs. Saudi Arabia recognizes that. So they have to turn green. And they have plenty of resources to turn green because they have the sun, they have solar energy. They have more energy than anybody else in terms of looking into AI, looking into stablecoin and other revolutions. And Hong Kong can play a very, very important role. Let me give you a couple of examples. The biggest growing carbon market in the world today is China, bar none. Why is that? I've already mentioned it's the last remaining manufacturing superpower. It has to ameliorate, mitigate many of its industrial policies. Therefore, 16 years ago, in 2008, China started its first carbon market. Many people, I think Hong Kong, had no idea that was going on. That was in Tianjin. The second carbon market was in Beijing, 2009. Third carbon market, Shanghai, 2010. Today, there are 8 different carbon markets in China, plus one national market set up in 2023. Now, what is the problem with that picture? The problem is fragmentation. With the fragmentation of the different carbon markets in China and no uniformity in standards and patchy verification, etc., it needs to clean up its act. How can it do it? How can it, as it were, integrate with world carbon markets, particularly the European Union, also Indonesia and other places? It can only do it through Hong Kong. Ours is the game to lose. Because at the end of the day, with regulatory transparency, which we have, with deep knowledge of markets, which we have, with the rule of law, which we have, with an independent judiciary we have, you cannot reinvent Hong Kong overnight. It doesn't happen. We all remember Russia tried to turn Kaliningrad in 1993. This was Boris Yeltsin's idea. Kaliningrad on the Baltic Sea into Hong Kong. It was a non-starter. Non-starter, no rule of law, no independent judiciary. What is it? Just a naval port, you know, real Rust Belt country. Now, we are able to, as it were, consolidate China's carbon markets and integrate with the European Union. European Union looks forward to working with us because they know us. They understand us, they understand the common law system, they understand regulatory independence, etc. This is really our game. Let me look at other things like green bonds. The Hong Kong government in 2023 was the world's first issuer of green bonds. And then last year, it was the world's first issuer of tokenized green bonds. And last year, we launched an ETF on Saudi equities in Hong Kong. The connectivity of Hong Kong, I know it sounds like a cliche and a truism, but within every truism, there's a kernel of truth. We have a connectivity with mainland China and with the rest of the world, which is unsurpassed. So we have Stock Connect with Shanghai. We have Bond Connect. We also now have Carbon Connect. And that connectivity between Hong Kong and China and the rest of the world is unique. There's no substitute for that. I mean, I think Singapore will be the first to concede that geography is important. And we have both geography and history on our side. Now, when we look at markets to replace United States and the European Union, what are we looking at? We're looking at two things. ASEAN, number one, Middle East, Gulf, GCC, number two. Now, they're different. ASEAN is actually low-hanging fruit because since 1850, since the Taiping Rebellion, mid-19th century, Hong Kong, then a British possession, was the banker to the Chinese diaspora in Southeast Asia. In times of turmoil, both in mainland China, in the decline, the long decline of the Qing dynasty after the First Opium War, and the yet to emerge into independence countries in Southeast Asia, then under Dutch, British, and French colonial domination, the diaspora looked to Hong Kong. Not just for banking, not just for capital raising, not just for IPOs, they also looked to Hong Kong as a cultural center for education of their children. And when I was growing up, I'm betraying my age now, when I went to primary school and high school, there was no international schools in Hong Kong, zero. Because HKIS was only started in 1968. My classmates at the time came from Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, South Asia, Pakistan, and so on. And we even had Americans in our school. The son of the head of Pan Am, which I know sounds like a quaint old name now, came to our school. And he created, in 1964, all the records for Hong Kong in swimming, particularly in butterfly and freestyle. This was how cosmopolitan Hong Kong is. When I was working for Chris Patton at the tail end of the transition, later with Sik Tung, I had heads of missions of ASEAN countries together with their visiting ministers come to me and say, you know, why has Hong Kong turned its back on us? They say, we understand you can make a lot of money in mainland China, Pearl River Delta, Lower Yangtze Valley, etc. But if you don't even spare a nanosecond to think about Southeast Asia, you will leave a power vacuum. And the power vacuum will be filled by you-know-who. And of course, you-know-who filled that. Now, that is low-hanging fruit. We can resuscitate that connection. We're doing it already, all over ASEAN, particularly Indonesia, Malaysia, including Singapore, Vietnam, Thailand. Middle East is a different proposition. Middle East is a new market, you could say. But our collaboration, and the word is collaborative, it's not competitive, with Abu Dhabi, with Dubai, with Doha, Qatar, with Riyadh, and now also with Kuwait, Oman. This is expanding at warp speed. And we know the Chinese community, both from mainland China and from Hong Kong and from Singapore, have been built up at extraordinary pace throughout the GCC countries. This is a new market for us, but it's growing. And there's huge interest on both sides. We know, for example, HKMA has signed a MOU and set up a fund with PIF. But even that is a drop in the ocean. The real dynamic comes from the private sector, where we have, for example, a fund originating in Hong Kong which handles Mubadala money and matches it dollar for dollar with SOE money from CICC, from CIC, from BOC, from PetroChina, etc. That collaboration, dollar for dollar collaboration, is real. And this is just the beginning of the process. So I would say, look, let's not get hung up on how bad the market is performing and how awful things look. I don't think they do. I mean, the flip side of the coin is that out of these sets of challenges, they're all real. They're all real, and they could get a lot worse. I mean, with the new Trump White House, it could be extremely volatile, unpredictable. But in every crisis, there's opportunity. We know that. And we have been looking at that and building on that, not today, but from 4 years past. So that's my, sorry to be a bit long-winded, but that's my answer to the question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I thought you were going to talk about the stock market, the equity market, capital market in Hong Kong. You started talking about GCC and ASEAN, which is wonderful. I have a lot of follow-up questions about those regions, but in the interest of time, let me turn to the second panelist, and it will be Alpha Lau, who is the Director General of Invest Hong Kong. And for those of you who are outside of Hong Kong or who haven't been to Hong Kong for long enough, Invest Hong Kong is actually a government department responsible for attracting and facilitating direct investment into Hong Kong. Alva has held many senior roles in multinational firms and Chinese corporations before. You're the best person to do that job. So as we all know, a lot of people left Hong Kong during the 2 or 3 years of COVID. Some multinational firms, especially among the American ones, have relocated their headquarters away from Hong Kong to other places. In a recent report I read and publicized by Invest Hong Kong, the number of regional headquarters and also sort of local headquarters have increased in Hong Kong. So I just want to give Alpha a chance to talk about what has changed in terms of policy or in terms of the economic environment.
Sure. The biggest change, I think, that led to that number in the past few years, I say, would have been the pandemic. I know it sounds a bit tiring to still talk about that this day and age, but it did affect Hong Kong a fair bit because of the restrictions, etc. And there have been comments that we did so-called open up fully later than some cities around the region. Now, of course, the government chose to put lives ahead of anything else at that time, and I agree with that. So, but what I have seen so far is that I'm very opportune to have taken up my current post just over a year ago, when we were meant to be recovering from the pandemic and how to bring the businesses back here again. And I actually have a very positive thoughts about where we're going. I'm actually very gung-ho, very happy about where we're going. Now, back to your numbers first. The total number of companies with parent companies or founders outside of Hong Kong had been hovering around the 9,000 mark actually since 10 years ago, certainly since 2020. But it remained a bit steady, slightly dropping during the pandemic. But then at this last year, it's gone up to 9,960, a historical high. Not a high since the pandemic, but a historical high. All right, this is because of a couple of factors. Firstly, because after the pandemic, the companies are now starting to have to look for growth regions again. I know the global economy is still a little bit wait and see, but overall, if you look for growth, where is growth? It is Asia. And despite the slowing of a slightly slower economy in China, it is still growing very healthily. And for foreign entities, looking for that growth, looking for shareholder return, you're going to have to come back to Asia, firstly. And secondly, for mainland Chinese companies, the geopolitics has actually forced Chinese companies to actually look abroad, to so-called go out, in a way even faster than ever. Now, China is interesting. Mainland China is very interesting. Companies also work on their own shareholder return or their own business plan, but there's also this thing called country-guided direction. And the guided direction is that you have to go out. There's a saying in China, if you don't go out, you are out of the game. All right, so we have actually seen a big influx of Chinese companies now looking to expand not only the manufacturing, but also the sales well beyond the borders. And the first place to do it would be Hong Kong. And I'll go into that a bit more later, because the thing is, Hong Kong is a springboard. And I agree with the previous panelists completely. We have always survived very well in being the most liberal, freest economy, freest way to do business in the world. And it's quite amazing that foreign investors, including mainland Chinese investors, come to me and say, nothing needs to be approved in Hong Kong when we come and do business. Well, pretty much, unless you're a regulated industry like finance. And things are so simple. We take it for granted that the simple tax system, etc., we take it for granted because we're living here. But to some of these countries, including our neighboring Singapore, mainland China cities, they are surprised that we've got nothing pretty much except corporate and personal income tax. To them, it's beyond their imagination. But does this itself enough to attract companies? No, I always tell my colleagues, because my job is to help companies set up in Hong Kong. What is it in it for the companies? How can they earn money? What is the next reach? How can we help them expand? We need to give them the why to come here, and not what Hong Kong wants and what Hong Kong government wants, but what is in it for you and your companies. All right, so what they're looking for, I talk about expansion, the growth in Asia. All right, so European, American, and other companies continue to come here, despite the reports. Sharing some data, the increase in the number of companies, the total number of companies, number one source of location of where the new companies, the non-Hong Kong companies come from is mainland China, particularly because of this go-out rush now. And the top five, and they remain to be US, UK, Japan, Singapore, never slowed. They all grew last year. Now, so what I see is that even for American companies, for example, those who have moved out are the loudest. Everyone else quietly makes their money. Because these days, I don't want to go too much into politics, but there's a saying that maybe, certainly for the last administration, or the current one, until Mr. Trump comes on board, it's almost like McCarthyism 2.0. It's like some American companies tell me, if you're making a lot of money in mainland China and Hong Kong, you might get a call from your senator saying, why? All right? So, and certain industries, particularly in AI technology, of course, are very sensitive. But as we can see, even recently in the AFF, etc., they're telling me, people follow the money, people follow the growth, the demographic growth in Asia and China is immense, and this is where we're coming from. So to sum up, I think Hong Kong continues to have our natural advantage of being bang in the middle of Asia, not in Southeast Asia or North. We are geographically strategic location. We've got a very easy system, and we are the only place with a unique access to China while still being an international city, which is why Singaporean companies are the number 4 of my source of companies coming into Hong Kong. So I see that. I'm very positive about that. And the government is also prioritizing in certain sectors, such as information technology, fintech, AI, etc., where they're actually putting more subsidies, etc., policy drives to help these companies move into Hong Kong and survive. So I hope this gives a bit of a taster of what I see from my day-to-day job.
Thank you so much, Alpha. It's very comprehensive and you speak very effectively. To prove to Professor Zhiwu Chen that Hong Kong is more than professional service and finance, so today in this panel, in addition to finance and investment, we actually have representatives from art, culture, as well as technology. So before I turn to art, let me talk to Sunny Tan, who is the chairman of Hong Kong Productivity Council. He's also a legislative council member, as well as an industrialist. Maybe you can talk about what HKPC has been doing, but let me be a bit more specific because there's some background that I need to share. The 2024 policy address outlines midterm to long-term development plans for new industrialization in Hong Kong, right? So we don't talk about re-industrialization, we talk about new industrialization. Mr. Tang, could you provide your perspective on the progress of new industrialization as well as innovation and technology in Hong Kong?
Thank you, thank you. Put it this way, Hong Kong has been an industrial center for a long, long time. I think I don't want to spend the time to talk about the history. But then as it evolves, I think what we are seeing is we are moving from traditional manufacturing, eventually moving into the supply chain management because our GDP per capita as well as our wage has been going up. So we'll be moving our production away. But our general industrial services has been in place all the time. We see a lot of bankers here as well. So our trade finance and all the financial products and services is also supporting the industrial growth. And throughout that process, HKPC, we call HKPC, Hong Kong Productivity Council, we've been playing a very important role for the past 57 years. This year is going to be 58 year. Our job is to support the industry in terms of the technological advancement. How do we make the product faster, better, and with the deployment of newest equipment, so on and so forth. And now it comes to this generation, we are talking about how do we apply industrial AI, robotics, just to leapfrog the entire competition. And what we are trying to do is to work with every single sector and see how we can help them to build up the competitiveness along the entire supply chain. Because Hong Kong, we are not talking about just you make the best toy or make the best piece of garment, because it involves the entire chain. At the same time, we are also very closely work with our industry stakeholder in evaluating how we adjust our supply chain. All right. I think the previous session we talked about certain geopolitics. I think in the past 30, 40 years, we have been winning along a similar formula. Western market, you have the order, you bring in technology, you bring in the money, we produce in Hong Kong, eventually produce in China, Southeast Asia. The formula is pretty much the same, but it just evolves, okay? But I think this time there is a drastic change because of geopolitical situation. We are talking about also the development of our mainland China in terms of its completeness of supply chain, as well as the technological change right now. I would say what we call the industrial revolution, the fourth industrial revolution. All these things are really hitting into our industrial development, and we need to go back and reassess what is going on and how do we do all these adjustments. One thing that I'm from the background of apparel and textile. We always look into quota in the past. So we're very sensitive into policy, global policy, trade. And now it's not only about apparel, but we all know the 301 in the States, and we don't know what will come out, but then we know that that's definitely something that we have to look into. And as we make all these changes, as we understand all these changes, I will not be surprised. We will be able to see certain limitation of what we, Hong Kong or China, cannot do with high tariff, but at the same time, there could be certain opportunities, okay, for Hong Kong having the position along the supply chain and say, that, okay, it makes sense to make in Hong Kong. That's part of the new industrialization. Maybe let me give you some interesting example. Hong Kong is we have a very good reputation in terms of our quality, our trust. So we are very good at making healthcare products, put it this way. In the past, we are talking about making toys and garments, but we are very good at healthcare products, vitamins, supplements, Chinese medicines, right? So all these, would you buy something from China, or you say, okay, I'll buy something from made in Hong Kong? Definitely made in Hong Kong. So that's the one area, life science, all these, which is also supported by Invest Hong Kong and Oasis. But at the same time, we are also looking at certain maybe more sophisticated high-tech area in terms of how we can also become a supplier to China, to mainland China, because we are seeing all these satellites going into the sky, right? All these industries, they not only need the domestic market to support the development, but Hong Kong can play a very important role, okay? So in terms of new industrialization, we are seeing the modernization of traditional industries. We call 升級轉型, right? And then we are seeing the emerging industries coming into Hong Kong where it makes sense. So these are the two areas I see on new industrialization. And then the last thing that I see on new industrialization is really what I call the internationalization, okay? Or maybe I put it this way. Let me give you one example of what we did, HKPC. The story goes like this. In Beijing, there is a AI company helping Beijing Airport to come up with the self-driving, driverless vehicle for moving the luggages, okay, from the airplane into the terminal. Did it quite well. As they try to sell to foreign investors and users, they say, I don't believe it will work because it only works in Beijing because of its own system, okay, its own government. So what happened was we, HKPC, brought this company into Hong Kong, okay? We helped them to work with airport authority, and then eventually they won the contract and implemented into our airport now in Hong Kong. And because of that, a lot of airports from around the world come and take a look at the system and say that we really like this, we want it, all right? And at the same time, other cities in mainland China, they don't look at Beijing, but they came to Hong Kong to take a look at the system and say, that, okay, we want the system too. So you can see that Hong Kong provides a very important international aspect. I think Alpha also talked about its international standard, international market, and the community to showcase what the Chinese product can do as it goes internationalization. Not only we go and say that we sell in the market, but then the standard itself, the communication, the product, all these things, Hong Kong will be an important area, and then that will also support our new industrialization. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Sunny. I guess your sharing is actually related to the first panel, right? You know, Hong Kong has a set of institutions that are globally recognized and trust about the quality that we can provide and the standardization that we can offer. You know, still attract a lot of investment and still help some of the Chinese companies to use Hong Kong as a springboard to further expand internationally. So the last panelist is Wendy Gan, who is actually a distinguished Hong Kong University alumni. She has been very supportive, not only to the business school at Hong Kong U, but also the entire university. Currently, she is a Deputy Chief Executive of West Kowloon Cultural District Authority, as well as CEO of WestK Enterprise Limited. Last year, we had the Vice Chairman of West Kowloon, Bernard Chan, to come to speak about the West Kowloon Cultural District. And then he said, well, C.H. Tung, the first Chief Executive in Hong Kong, had a very long vision. He thought, well, in New York, you have MoMA. In London, you have Tate. How come Hong Kong doesn't have a good art and culture museum to represent Hong Kong, which is obviously the third most important financial center? And so now we have it. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about how it is doing, how important it is to have art and cultural activities in Hong Kong, and how they are contributing to our economy and also tourism.
Thank you, Heiwai. Thank you for having me. And I really appreciate you making me the last panelist to speak, because I think it's an excellent occasion to illustrate that art and culture is not just what you think. It's not just visual arts or performing arts, but it's a whole ecosystem that involves finance, for example. So Daniel, you might like to know that we are actually the first statutory body in Hong Kong to issue a sustainability-linked loan. So in addition to your green loan, you might think of an art and culture bond later on. We, of course, are looking into technology as well. Digital art, of course, is one area. But at the same time, we're actually issuing a live tender right now, looking for a technology partnership to help us to use AI to help our processes, to help with our marketing, our customer relations management, etc. We, of course, work very closely with Invest Hong Kong. Our latest joint effort brought in a French company that does AR, VR immersive experience, the first exhibition being on Notre Dame de Paris. So with that, I'd like to pose a question actually to the audience, if I may. How many of you have heard of Hong Kong being called cultural desert? Hands up, please. You see, not too many nowadays, right? And if you think about it, for the past few years, I actually have not heard of this term, right? So I like to think that West Kowloon Cultural District has played a part in that. By the way, we now call ourselves WestK because, again, part of the branding, make it more, modern and to the point. If you look at our new logo, what happened actually is that we dropped Oolong, so West Kowloon, and we dropped OWLOON. So now it's WestK. And actually, unfortunately, I don't have the logo here, but if you look at it, a distinctive element is the West, the T of the West, combined with the K, actually looks like HK. So we want to bring up the point that we are anchored in Hong Kong. Some of you may, I think, hopefully most of you know about this project, which is a strategic investment by the Hong Kong government to create an arts and cultural hub serving as East meets West cultural exchange. They invested 21.6 billion to build the infrastructure, and they set up the West Kowloon Cultural Authority in 2008, and we are now operating the facilities on a self-financed basis. We have completed M+, which opened at the end of 2021, and Hong Kong Palace Museum in mid-2022. We have 2 performing arts venues and 11 hectares art park. But what you may not know is that we are only about 50% built of the whole project. The whole piece of land along the Victoria Harbour actually is 40 hectares. So we're now about halfway there. And yet, I'm glad to, I like to believe that we're up there along with the world-class institutions. Why do I say that? Although M+ was opened at the end of 2021, by now, according to the Art newspaper, in 2023, it has already become the 15th most visited museum in the world, and number 2 in Asia. And even Palace Museum, although it's open since 2022, it's number 51 in the world and within the top 10 of Asia. Another example that we've made the mark is that last year, 2024, we organized the Hong Kong International Cultural Summit. We had 2,000 delegates, and we had 420,000 people viewing the summit online. And the good thing is that we actually signed 21 MOUs with other world-class institutions like Tate, V&A, the National Museum of Tokyo, Centre Pompidou, etc. But we're not just leaving it at the MOU stage, we're actually taking action. For example, the exhibition right now at Hong Kong Palace Museum not only presents art pieces from Versailles and the Forbidden City, but they contrast them and actually tells us a story that at least I didn't know. There was actually a lot of interaction between the Forbidden City and Versailles during the 17th and the 18th century. Another example is with M+. This year in March, we're having a collaboration with the Museum of Picasso in Paris. And we're not just showing off 60 pieces, masterpieces of Picasso. We are also contrasting these pieces with Asian pieces from the M+ collection. So it gets to illustrate that we're not just another museum showing pieces from other parts of the world or maybe our own collection. We always try to create a difference. And this East meets West theme is a very strong theme within us. So this is a business school, so I think you like numbers. So if I may, in 2023, actually 4.4 million people visited our 2 museums and the performing arts. But then what does it really mean to the economy, right? This is, after all, a forum on the economy. So at the early 2024, we actually asked a consultant to calibrate not only the tangible, but the non-tangible value. And to cut the long story short, we actually contributed 6.86 billion Hong Kong dollars to the GDP, which is approximately 0.23 of the GDP of Hong Kong. And we also contributed to more than 10,000 jobs, which is about 0.28 of the total working population. So numbers aside, I guess it's also how we're able not only just to position WestK, but how to position Hong Kong. So we've been successful bringing in international partners to WestK, but we are also going out, but Alpha going out in the good sense. We're going global. So the exhibitions that we've done, the very successful one that just ended, like IMPay, we actually, our curators not only curated this exhibition, but they started from scratch. It took them 7 years. Although we can't say that we own the intellectual property because there are pieces from the family, from colleagues, but we own the curation of this exhibition. So what we are now doing is exporting the exhibition, and we will be showing IMPay in Shanghai and in Qatar. We've already done this with the earlier exhibition on Yayoi Kusama, and we brought it to Bilbao, Spain, as well as Porto, Portugal. So this is an illustration of a new source of pillar for the economy, if you like. So intellectual property is definitely one strong area. But then after all, we are a statutory body. And that's why sometimes when we reach out doing negotiation, there might be some more steps that we need to fulfill. Hence, that's why the authority just established a special purpose vehicle of wholly owned subsidiary called WestK Enterprise. And with this, we really emphasize on commercialization, looking for new revenue sources, leveraging on the authorities, assets, and expertise. An example, we are actually talking to a municipal government about a space in that city. So we can go in and offer consultancy and advise, oh, maybe you can do a museum here, exhibition space, retail here. So consultancy in that sense. But then, unlike any other consultant, we can also provide the programming and the content. So imagine we can supply a source of exhibitions. We also run our own programs. So that's the new direction we're taking. And given that this is the future of Hong Kong, I like to count that as part of it. Thank you.
Professor Tang, if I may. Sorry, thank you. Sorry to jump in, I'm aware of the time. Sure. I also had a quick thought about this, and it ties in very closely with what Wendy said as well, because earlier you were asking me very specifically about regional headquarters, so the person that I am, execution-based, so I answered your question. Now, after all, if you look at the future of Hong Kong economy, so, I did study before I came today. I read through most of your green paper, although not every single word of it. It took me like 5 hours, but I did that last night. So why do we all think that Hong Kong's economy is not good? It's not bad, actually. But if you look at the deficit, I'm not an economist, but my view is, if you look at our top 5 revenue, the only thing that's dropped so far is land premium. And that's been dropping quite tremendously because we've been relying too much on it, 27% down to a much lower percentage now. But if you drill down to the past 5 years, every single number, which is like profit tax, income tax, they're all actually increasing. And then I thought, what is behind income tax and profit tax? Because we don't charge companies or persons on anything unless they make money first. And then we take a very small bite out of it, right? 15% max, 16.5%. So in the end, in my limited role, is that what can I bring more into Hong Kong? If Hong Kong is a flow place, we thrive on deals, we thrive on flow business. Financial industry, professional services, these are always our top industries. They also thrive on flow. Transitional financing, whatever financing, it is flow. Underlying is industry, such as what Sunny talked about, and increasingly. So when we track companies in, you want to also look beyond the traditional industries because in the end they serve another industry. So we are now facing, every time I study art and culture, you gave far more numbers than my team has found out, and then realized there was so much money to be made out of it by companies who come in. Team Lab, Usector, all these new companies, entertainment, immersive, NFT trading, it's got finance at the back of it. And then I look at sports. Behind it, the economy is also huge, but we haven't paid enough attention to these new growth grounds that transcend beyond geopolitics. Sports and culture, particularly and usually sustainability is another one that goes always beyond geopolitics. And I think in the way, if we look at how we want to increase, we look at those areas and we try to now disproportionately bring in more companies in those areas, because whatever happens, US, China, going forward, the fundamental which supports them would be finance and technology, which we will always continue to support. But I just want to add on, but great, I will come to you for more deals and numbers.
The consultancy, please.
Sure.
No, I totally agree with you. Given the geopolitical factors, we should really look at things that are less geopolitically sensitive. But again, let me quote Bernard Chen. A year ago, he said, even art can be subject to geopolitical shocks, just less compared to AI, technology, semicon. I don't know why time passed by so fast. There's only 1 minute left. I actually have another set of questions for each of the panelists, but I guess I don't even have time to ask the questions. So why don't we just jump to the conclusion? I apologize for the dean who used up all my time. So let me just jump to the conclusion. And according to what I sent you, the conclusion is spend a minute, each of you, to talk about the short-term economic outlook 2025, the medium-term economic outlook in 3 years. Don't worry about the long term, as Kings has said. In the long run, we all die. So 1 year, 3 years, talk about the upside and the downside, please. 1 minute from each of you. Maybe starting from Sunny, and then we come back to Daniel in the end.
I think we are going through a transition, so it's not going to be easy. The successful businessmen that make money in the past 20, 30 years, they are also getting to the age of retirement planning. So their risk appetite will be different. We are in need of relying on a new breed of entrepreneurs. And that would not only come from Hong Kong, but the opportunists of people coming from mainland, Southeast Asia primarily, but then, and also around the world. I think we don't underestimate Hong Kong's capability, the 8 centers. I think the infrastructure that Hong Kong has built up over the years is very, very competitive. But it's a new interpretation of how we see the market and opportunity. But the transition will be tough. So I would say in the near term, that would be my view. Long term or midterm, for the time that I can see, I see Hong Kong to still be very, very competitive because of its unique background. We are the only, I would say, to my standard, the only international metropolitan in Asia. Okay, no question about it. We have the unique capability that nobody has. We do global trade, global business, not Hong Kong business. So by looking at 7 million people, when we look inward, it looks very in despair, really, okay? So sad. But when you look at just I always look at Margaret, it's like, this is a global business. So imagine 7 million people, we are making really a lot of business. So I think the trend is just what kind of business we are doing might be changing, adjusting, maybe into arts and culture and many other things. But then we are really doing global business, and it will continue. And I think the way how US has been behaving, all other partnering countries, they are looking for alternatives because they don't know who will be the next for Trump to go after. So I think that will be also the long-term opportunity. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Sunny. Alva?
I always feel that the people most critical of Hong Kong are our own people, actually. Even my friends who are really happy about it, very pro-country, pro-everything, deep down they say, we are going down the shit, that kind of thing. But really, if you look at the numbers, if you look at the reality, is that we are too spoiled, actually. We're just spoiled about the open society. You're right, we're the most international city in here. And I was thinking about it. We were thinking always about numbers and business, and then we forget, in the end, business decision makers think about their livelihoods, their lives. What is it for my family? Hong Kong is great, right? We all know the talk about how you can go to a beach in 20 minutes and Michelin star restaurants abound in Hong Kong, etc. But also we're very welcoming. The previous panel talked about the number of talent passes, etc. And then no questions asked, 7 years later, you are a PR. We do not have a second standard to reassess on whether you are you're worth a PR. But looking for, I think, one of the biggest opportunities is just to really, it's kind of like if you think positive, it will be positive, because happiness is a choice. I'm going philosophical now, I'm sorry. And sometimes all prophecies are self-fulfilling. If you do it, if you think you will do well, remember, but I agree with you, you need to be able to take risks. We must let go of the past where we say, oh, we used to do this very well in the 80s, right? Things are different now. How can you take it to the next level? But long story short, opportunities abound because we're international city, even more so than before now, because even recently, Mr. Xi Jinping, said Hong Kong must remain one country, two system to benefit the country, and therefore we've got an even bigger opportunity now more than ever to serve as a bigger bridge. Thank you.
I love your optimism. It's important. And I agree. People who are the most critical about Hong Kong are Hong Kongers themselves. Wendy.
Right. Talking about the future, I have to share with you the recent fortune cookie message that I got. It actually says, enrich your life today. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is mystery. So I can't tell about the future, especially with Trump coming. And we can't really rely on history. In fact, we should not. What has proven true is that what has been successful yesterday may not be successful today. We really have to change our mindset. So all we can do is exactly enrich your life today, which includes, changing the mindset to cope with the changing environment, be adaptive, such that when the right and seek out the opportunity amongst the crisis. I guess that's the motto. In terms of art and culture, I guess for me, one of the big mindset change is to think of it as an ecosystem, really not just fine arts, visual arts, whatever. And in Kowloon, WestK, we certainly do that. We have positioned ourselves as the cultural CBD, for example. So as part of the portfolio, which fortunately now is 99% leased, we have not only Phillips, which of course is one of the biggest art auction houses, but we also have Peak Re, which is a Hong Kong-grown reinsurance company. So you may ask, why do you have a reinsurance company within Arts and Cultural Hub? Well, art insurance is a big thing. Peak Re they do reinsurance for art heritage site, art collections, etc. Of course, they do other insurances as well. But that is the point. We should change our mindset and don't be just critical. Think of the whole ecosystem, for example. Yes, I think the point is not only just art and culture ecosystem, we can also think beyond the silos. So why don't we do art and culture ecosystem crossover with healthcare, for example, art therapy, music therapy, crossover with ESG. We can work through how attending a talk or visiting an exhibition could actually help corporates fulfill their ESG, for example. So I think the mindset change is the key, because the future is a mystery.
Thank you, Wendy. I love your pitch about art ecosystem. Daniel.
I just wish to make three very short points. Number one, I totally echo what has been said about art and its impact on Hong Kong's future, because we need to be holistic. I'm actually chairing a working group to look into how we can leverage our financial capacity to turn Hong Kong into a global arts center. And actually, we have all the usual suspects participating, including Sotheby's, Christie's, and the really big global collectors, etc. But I don't want to say more, because I do agree with this holistic approach, and we're actually putting our money where our mouths are. The second point I want to make is going back to my original point about transition finance and transition economy. As we move towards peak carbon in China in 2030, as we move towards carbon neutrality globally between 2050 and 2060, the actual transition finance required is over 1.1 trillion US dollars. Now that's a massive shift. And that's something that we in Hong Kong recognize, and that's something that we are participating in already. I mean, Hong Kong is not going to be the global solution for everything, but we are moving exactly in the right direction. The final point I want to make is really to echo what Xi Jinping said on the 1st of July 2022. Now that's, I guess, 2.5 years ago, but he said something very important that was not reported in Western media, but hugely reported both in Hong Kong and in mainland China. Number one, he said, one country, two citizens will continue beyond 2047. Nobody's ever said that. No Chinese leader ever said that. Second thing, even more extraordinary, he says Hong Kong's prosperity rests on the common law. So I'm going back to my roots, and I plead guilty to being a lawyer. Nobody likes lawyers, but I guess love the law, I hate the law. It is an essential building block of prosperity, stability, and our future. And we know the common law will continue. And that's the same legal system, which is the most dynamic, the most market-friendly, and of course, that's a common heritage between us and the United States. Long may that continue.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for the great conclusion to talk about Hong Kong as an international center with all the institutions that we inherited and given by the central government, which also connect this panel back to the first one. I think Hong Kong has a lot of institutional advantages. I don't have time to summarize the whole panel discussion, but I think fundamentally each panelist contributes different things, but in the end it is all related to how Hong Kong is unique because of what Daniel has mentioned, and Alva mentioned like flow is important. Let's tax some of it, let's drag out some of the profits, profit the local economy. Both Sunny and Wendy have mentioned, well, above and beyond the traditional industries, there are actually new activities and a new era, especially among the young people, actually accept that Hong Kong can have a different profile in the near future. Let us give a round of applause to our distinguished panelists. Really wonderful discussion.
What a wonderful morning with so many exciting and interesting discussions.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we approach the conclusion of morning session, we would like to capture this memorable moment with the group photo. May I invite all our esteemed speakers, moderators, panelists, and contributors to the green paper to join us on stage. Your valuable insights and contributions have greatly enriched our discussions. And this photo will serve as a lasting memento of the collaborative spirit we have shared today.
Thank you all. Please be seated. Before we dive into lunch, may we invite Professor Heiwai Tang, Professor Ling Chen, Chair of Finance, Stalax Professor in Finance, Associate Vice President of the University of Hong Kong and Associate Dean of HKU Business School, and Professor Liu Yang, Associate Professor of Finance, to share us the newly launched Hong Kong Economic Policy Green Paper 2025. May we also invite Ms. Alice Hui, Head of Development and Alumni, to be the moderator. Please welcome.
Start, all right. Okay, hello everybody. I was told that we need to now provide an impromptu lunch entertainment, right? So thank you very much everybody for coming. So this panel is about the Hong Kong Policy Green Paper we have just recently published last week. And since it's fresh out of the oven, I'm sure a lot of us haven't went through it yet. So it's great to have some of our co-authors here to talk about the paper. It promises to be an interesting panel because it basically embodies exactly what Professor Chen Zhiwu told us not to do, right? So let's get started. So our first question is for Professor Ling Chen, who is the Chair of Finance at HKU Business School, Associate Vice President of HKU, and Associate Dean for Research and Knowledge. So could you tell us about your chapter in the Green Paper on the challenges and opportunities facing Hong Kong's financial and capital market?
Okay, so well, the chapter was a very kind of a descriptive piece. So basically, what we did in the chapter is like we try to monitor the fundraising activities in the Hong Kong market. So we know that Hong Kong is known for its IPO market. That's why Hong Kong was labeled as a financial center. In 2023, we have only kind of a 5.9 billion kind of US dollar fundraised from the market, and last year increased all the way to almost double the number. So basically, what we did is we kind of document the change in the fundraising, and also we document the trend in this the trading activities, like the trading volumes over the years, and which is kind of a positive for this market liquidity. And also we calculate the arm-hold ratio, which is like a more direct measure of the market liquidity. And more importantly, we believe that the asset pricing actually depends a lot on the capital inflows. So we kind of track the capital inflows into the Hong Kong local market. Especially we have a lot of talk or concerns about the foreign capital inflows or outflows. So we kind of trace the foreign ownership on the market, and also the capital inflows from mainland China, which is the coming from the north. So to get a better sense about the asset ownership, the ownership structures, and the composition of the investors in the Hong Kong market. Because we think this is quite critical for the Hong Kong. To remain an international financial center, we need to maintain a base for a diversified and also international group of investors.
Thank you, Professor Ling Chen. I guess the crowd is very hungry because even up here, I could hardly hear your answer. But thank you very much. Now let's move on to our second speaker, Professor Heiwai Tang, who is the Associate Dean for External Relations and the Director of Asia Global Institute. So, Professor Tang, I know you've been doing a lot of study on supply chain and how Hong Kong can retain that role of a supply chain hub. So what can we do to enforce that role for Hong Kong, please?
Thank you, Alice. Just let me spend 30 seconds to talk about this thick book that you all have on your table. It took us half a year to put together. It's actually a collective effort of the Hong Kong U Business School. This is the fourth time that we are publishing the Green Paper, and the whole idea is to allow our diverse, young and old and experienced or junior economists, financial experts, as well as other experts in the business school to use their knowledge and talents to study how Hong Kong can be better, right? We are not in a position to say, well, Hong Kong is not doing great, the government is not doing a good job, but there's always room to improve. So therefore, this is really what we are trying to achieve in this green paper. And the whole goal is not to write the blueprints for the government, but to really get the community to talk more about how we can make this city more inclusive, a better economy, as well as more relevant for China as well as for the world. About supply chains, I have been doing research on trade and about supply chain for the last 2 decades. And I was born and raised in Hong Kong. I obviously have experienced the changes in Hong Kong from an industrial city to a financial hub. And Hong Kong used to be #1 in 2000 in terms of the cargo shipment, but now it's around #10. So people still expect that Hong Kong should be an international trade center, given this institutional advantage, geographic location, and the role for China. But how come the volume is not increasing? Well, because we are facing quite a lot of competition. Some of them are actually competition from our neighboring cities. So to rebuild Hong Kong as an international trade center, in the chapter that I wrote for this Green Paper project, I argued, let's focus on trade services, which include trade finance, trade insurance, etc. We think about supply chains is really like a spiraling curve, sequential processes. Trade is really the last stage or close to the last stage of the supply chain. There are lots of stuff before export, right? For example, production, which is obviously going to happen outside of China, outside of Hong Kong, and increasingly outside of China because of China +1 strategy. But we also need to understand that this sort of restructuring of supply chain processes actually give us a lot of opportunities to make money, right? When supply chain become more diversified, when shocks to supply chains become more frequent, actually manufacturers and exporters want to buy more insurance, right? When trade becomes costlier because you have to go through a lot of different routes, trade finance is also more important. So I can go on and on, but what I'm trying to say is to rebrand or rebuild Hong Kong as an international trade center, we should focus on trade services rather than like getting a cargo to move to Hong Kong and then get it out from Hong Kong like what we did in the last 40 years.
Thank you, Professor Tang. Professor Liu Yang, I think you'll have to try to speak a bit louder and over the crowd, my dear. So my question for you is that I know that your chapters are on Hong Kong government's fiscal health, correct? So recently, the Hong Kong budget deficit is marked just below $100 billion Hong Kong dollars. Should we be worried? How's the health?
That's a great question, and I think it's the elephant in the room that we all start to worry about the fiscal deficit in the past 2, 3, 4 years, and it's comparable to a lot of the advanced economies that has become the highest almost in the world. Now, one way to tackle this question, whether we should be worried, we start to look at what's the source of it, right? Does it relate to the economic cycle? That's the first question. We usually can decompose the deficit into a cyclical component and a structural component. The cyclical one, by its name, is related to the economic cycle, up and down, while the structural is more about other reasons, welfare spending and other fiscal structural reasons. We find in our analysis that the majority of the recent deficit is actually structural. That sounds a bit worrisome. And in the past 20, 30 years, the variation of the deficits are all coming from structural. So when you have high surplus, it's structural surplus. And right now we have deficit, it's all structural deficit. Now what's the takeaway of this? First, I would actually think we shouldn't be relying on the economic recovery to automatically solve the fiscal pressure. It's not gonna work. But this is not a bad news for us because the government is in full control of the deficit. Because it's all structural, if the government tries to scale down some of the programs, actually can go down the deficit, bring down the deficit quite smoothly. And second, structural, the word sounds frightening, but structural doesn't mean permanent. Structural can be temporary.
just as we saw, a lot of the spendings are non-recurrent spendings. And one structural reason is the decline of the land-related revenue. This can be quite temporary, and that's why we shouldn't think of it as a very long-lasting phenomenon. While second, we can look at, we said the government has full control, so what the government is trying and planning to do. We look at their budget, and they claim that over the next 2, 3, 4 years, we are likely to see a new fiscal surplus quite soon. Now the question is whether we should trust the government forecast, right? Now what we try to do is to look at their track record, how the government did this budgeting and forecast in the past 20, 30 years, and our conclusion is that the government has been quite conservative for the majority of the time. They've been underestimating their income and overestimating the spending, end up getting more money and more reserve than they thought. So in that sense, it's true not only for the short term, but also for the long term. In that sense, it's good that government can carry out the plan and successfully bring it down. I'm actually quite optimistic on that plan. Now the third point is that if we have the deficit, what are we going to do with it? We have actually two options. Usually one way is to pay out using our reserve. The other way is to issue some debt to cover the deficit, right? So compared to a lot of the countries in the world, Hong Kong is in terrific position. We have dry powder in these two weapons, while many countries have no reserve and more than 100% of the GDP of debt, so they can do pretty much nothing. So in this case, we should fully take advantage of our reserve and the debt issuance possibility. For example, because of our conservatism, in the past 20 years, we have accumulated more reserves than we thought. We have, even after the COVID deficits, we have still higher reserves than what we had in 2004. In that case, it's a good use of the reserve. We don't need to worry about having not enough reserve. And secondly, just to echo what actually Professor Robinson talked about, good institution and the distribution of power among people and the government, right? The money in the bank account of the government probably is less efficient than money in the pocket of our people. So by trading off, cutting down some welfare programs and accumulating reserve, I don't think that's actually a good policy to go. And on the other hand, another way to do it, to tackle it, is to issue debt. And we have one of the lowest debt in the world. On top of that, we have one of the lowest interest rates. Our debt yield, bond yields are actually lower than the US Treasury, which shows a lot of the structural reasons that the market want a lot of government-issued safe assets. This could improve the liquidity, could improve the market efficiency, etc. And just this week, right, our PBOC governor has talked about the importance of offshore RMB development. I think a good approach to do this is to issue some of the RMB-denominated Hong Kong government debt. So just to quickly conclude, there is an issue, but I don't think we need to worry too much about it. And we have a lot of the ways to tackle it, and just to be cautious enough to keep track of the government future path of the revenue and the deficit, and we should be good to go.
Thank you very much, Professor Liu Yang. So I guess the last question is an open question, a very short one. So in the Green Paper, we highlighted that the Hong Kong is facing an urgent transition, which reveals an imminent need for innovation drivers. So what are these innovation drivers? Can we start with maybe Professor Lin Chen?
Yeah, we need to be, I think, getting back to Professor James Robinson's question, we need to be more inclusive. Like, in the past, the Hong Kong financial market focused too much on institutional investors, professional investors, but actually we need to pay a lot of attention to retail investors. Because we need to have a lot of retail investors to vibrate the market, to make the market more liquid, especially given the geopolitical tensions. A lot of institutional investors, they are very, very cautious about it. Based on our estimate, we still have 23% of the shares held by foreign institutional investors. Hong Kong market cap is about 35 trillion Hong Kong dollar. So in other words, we still have about 7 trillion Hong Kong dollar assets held by foreign investors. And these foreign investors, they are very sensitive to any kind of a geopolitical risk. So I think as a conclusion, we need to be more innovative to incorporate, to embrace more retail investors in this marketplace.
Thank you, Professor Chen. Professor Heiwai Tang?
Well, when we think about innovation, we tend to think about technology. But I think Hong Kong needs more than just technological innovation. We need institutional innovation. There have been quite a lot of complaints about slow processes, to build the northern metropolis. There have been complaints about bureaucracy, all the red tapes that companies have to go through in order to get the businesses going and to contribute to the Hong Kong economy. So I think that's one kind of institution that we tend to ignore. And second, we need a change of mindset, right? Born and raised in Hong Kong, I feel like Hong Kong people are not imaginative enough about how a new Hong Kong can be. They always think, well, we can only do finance and nothing else. But in universities, we actually have seen quite a lot of new innovation done by professors and scientists. How we can better use those innovation and scientific discovery to create new business opportunities and to help the Hong Kong people, as well as people in the Greater Bay Area and beyond, is really something that we have to think about, right? So, in short, we need institutional reforms, but we also need to think more holistically about the ecosystem and identify the bottlenecks that are missing, avoiding, more sort of positive sort of dynamism, as well as, innovative ideas to be more brought in to benefit the local and regional economy.
Great. Thank you very much, Professor Tang. Last but not least, Professor Liu Yang.
Innovation needs money. So still from the same perspective, the government has already carried out a few programs to provide funding for early entrepreneurs and innovative research programs. These are always good. And the university has already been highly supported a lot of these R&D projects. But I also want to echo what Heiwai has said. Given the fiscal situation, we were not in the old days with tons of money and less of a discipline. So now we are more disciplined. We need to think wiser where to spend the money. Maybe we should spend better in the R&D places and try to improve the institution and somehow reduce the size of some other regulatory related functioning and bureaucratic type of functioning department in the government. That's going to be more efficient, and with better institution, and the economy will be prosperous.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I think we've accomplished our mission. Thank you. Thank you so much again.
Much.